The Edlington Brothers. On April 4, 2009, in the former mining village of Edlington, South Yorkshire, two brothers aged 10 and 11 lured two boys, a 9-year-old and his 11-year-old uncle, to a desolate wasteland known as Brick Ponds under the guise of showing them a dead animal. What followed was a 90-minute ordeal of prolonged, sadistic violence that shocked the nation. The brothers subjected their victims to a litany of horrors. The boys were beaten with bricks, sticks, and stones, kicked, stamped on, and throttled with a noose. The older victim had a ceramic sink smashed onto his head, leaving him unconscious and partially naked in a ravine. Both victims were forced to strip and perform sexual acts on each other. The 9-year-old had his genitals stamped on and cigarettes pressed into wounds. The attackers recorded parts of the assault on a mobile phone and later told police they stopped only because their arms were aching. The younger victim, found wandering the streets covered in blood, alerted locals, who discovered his uncle near death. An air ambulance rushed the older boy to the hospital, where he spent 2 days on a ventilator. The brothers, who cannot be named due to lifelong anonymity orders, grew up in a toxic household in Doncaster marked by domestic violence, alcoholism, and neglect. Their father, a violent alcoholic, physically abused their mother and intimidated their 7 siblings. The brothers smoked cannabis, drank vodka, and watched violent pornography from a young age. Prior to the Edlington attack, the brothers had a documented history of aggression. The older brother assaulted a younger child, punched teachers, and attacked a mother on the street. The younger brother headbutted a teacher and engaged in other violent acts. Social services in Doncaster, already under government supervision due to 7 child deaths in 5 years, had 31 documented opportunities to intervene but failed to act. A serious case review later deemed the attack entirely preventable. The brothers were charged with attempted murder, grievous bodily harm, GBH, robbery, and sexual assault. Prosecutors ultimately accepted guilty pleas to GBH with intent and sexual offenses to spare the victims a traumatic trial. In January 2010, Judge Mr. Justice Keith sentenced the brothers to indefinite detention with a minimum term of 5 years, citing their chilling detachment and the serious risk they posed. He described their actions as deriving emotional pleasure from inflicting pain. In 2016, a high court granted the brothers lifelong anonymity, citing risks of retaliation. Released in 2017 with new identities, the younger brother was briefly re-jailed for possessing a machete. By 2023, both expressed remorse, with the younger stating he felt like a completely different person. Doncaster's Children's Services, labeled totally broken by officials, faced scathing criticism. Foster carers were unaware the brothers' violent father lived nearby. A leaked review revealed weak services and poor interagency coordination. Education Secretary Michael Gove condemned the serious case review as inadequate, prompting an independent inquiry. Doncaster Council disciplined 5 staff members and overhauled child protection protocols. The older victim suffered permanent physical and psychological scars, including nightmares and guilt over surviving. The younger boy struggled with school disruption and trauma from witnessing his uncle's near-death experience. Despite their injuries, both survivors showed remarkable resilience, with the older boy eventually recovering physically after multiple surgeries. A 2024 mini-documentary revisited the horror, highlighting the brothers' upbringing and the victims' ordeal. Critics question trying children in adult courts, given England's low age of criminal responsibility, 10 years. As Judge Keith noted, the attack was truly exceptional, a phrase that encapsulates both the brutality of the crime and the urgent need for societal vigilance to prevent its repetition. On April 23, 2012, in the southern Jizan region of Saudi Arabia, a 4-year and 7-month-old boy committed an act that shocked the world. After his father returned home without purchasing a PlayStation, the child grabbed his father's pistol, which had been placed on a table while the man was undressing, and shot him in the head at close range. The father died instantly, leaving a community and global audience grappling with questions about gun accessibility, childhood psychology, and parental responsibility. The boy had repeatedly asked his father for a Sony PlayStation, a popular gaming console. When the father returned home empty-handed, the child's frustration escalated into violence. The father, whose identity remains undisclosed, was described as a gun owner who left his weapon unsecured in the household. This lapse in firearm safety enabled the child to act impulsively. Reports suggest the boy likely did not comprehend the permanence of death. Experts theorized he mimicked actions seen in violent video games or media, where shooting is portrayed as a consequence-free act. Saudi authorities faced an unprecedented dilemma: how to adjudicate a crime committed by a child below the age of criminal responsibility. Under Saudi law, children under 7 are not held criminally liable. However, the case sparked debates about parental accountability and firearm regulations. Critics highlighted the father's failure to secure his weapon as a critical factor. In Saudi Arabia, where gun ownership is regulated but cultural norms often prioritize male authority, this incident prompted calls for stricter storage laws. The Arabic daily Asharq labeled the boy Saudi Arabia's youngest killer. Saudi Arabia has one of the highest rates of gun ownership in the Middle East, with firearms often symbolizing tribal pride. The incident underscored the risks of unsecured weapons in households with children. The case reignited global debates about violent video games' influence on behavior. Psychologist Dr. Phil McGraw argued that such games desensitize children to violence, citing studies linking aggressive gameplay to real-world aggression. At age 4, children lack a mature understanding of mortality. The boy likely perceived the act as a dramatic gesture rather than a lethal action. Developmental psychologists emphasize that toddlers often imitate behaviors without grasping their consequences, especially when exposed to media glorifying violence. While details about the family's dynamics are scarce, criminologist Kathleen Haida's research on parricide identifies common factors: domestic dysfunction, abuse, and access to weapons. Though the boy was not formally diagnosed, experts speculated that early exposure to firearms and inadequate parental supervision contributed to his actions. In 2011, the U.S. Supreme Court struck down a California law banning the sale of violent video games to minors, citing First Amendment protections. Critics argue such rulings overlook the potential psychological harm to children. Saudi Arabia's focus on rehabilitation over punishment for minors contrasts with its harsh penal code for adults. However, the lack of public updates on the boy's fate post-incident leaves questions about his long-term care. Activists urged Saudi authorities to mandate secure storage laws, akin to regulations in countries like Australia and Canada. While the boy's age precluded criminal charges, the incident exposed systemic failures in firearm safety, parental oversight, and media literacy. The Slender Man case of 2014. On May 31, 2014, in Waukesha, Wisconsin, 12-year-old Peyton Leutner was lured into the woods by her two best friends, Morgan Geyser and Anissa Weier, under the guise of playing hide and seek. What followed was a brutal, premeditated attack. Geyser stabbed Leutner 19 times with a 5-inch kitchen knife, targeting her arms, legs, liver, pancreas, and stomach, narrowly missing a major artery near her heart. Leutner, bleeding profusely, crawled to a nearby road where a bicyclist found her and called 911. She survived only after emergency surgery, with doctors later stating she was 1 millimeter away from certain death. The assailants, Geyser and Wire, fled the scene, washed blood off their hands at a Walmart restroom, and began walking toward Interstate 94. They claimed they intended to hike 300 miles to the Nicolet National Forest, where they believed Slender Man, a fictional internet horror character, resided in a mansion. Police found them hours later near the highway, carrying the knife and appearing calm and meek, despite the gravity of their actions. The girls' motive centered on Slender Man, a faceless, suit-clad figure created in 2009 during a Photoshop contest on the forum Something Awful. The character's lore expanded through crowdsourced horror stories on sites like Creepypasta Wiki, where users depicted him as a supernatural entity stalking children, causing paranoia, and demanding sacrifices. Geyser and Wire discovered Slender Man in early 2014 and became convinced he was real. They believed becoming his proxies required murdering someone to prove their loyalty and protect their families from his wrath. Morgan Geyser, diagnosed with early-onset schizophrenia, Geyser claimed Slender Man telepathically communicated with her and had visited her since childhood. She believed failure to kill Leutner would result in her family's death. Anissa Wire, though less delusional, Wire admitted to half-believing Slender Man's existence. She later described feeling pressured by Geyser to participate, fearing social rejection if she backed out. Their shared obsession blurred reality and fantasy. They used code words like cracker for knife and itch for kill, and spent months plotting, discussing duct taping Leutner's mouth during a sleepover or attacking her in a park bathroom before settling on the woods. Under Wisconsin law, minors aged 10+ charged with severe crimes like attempted first-degree homicide are automatically tried as adults. Despite their age, Geyser and Wire faced up to 65 years in prison. In 2017, Morgan Geyser pleaded guilty but was deemed not guilty by reason of mental disease. She received a 40-year commitment to a psychiatric institution, later reduced due to progress in treatment. Diagnosed with schizophrenia and autism, she began transitioning genders and sought conditional release as early as 2022, though petitions were initially denied over public safety concerns. Anissa Wire pleaded guilty to a lesser charge of attempted second-degree homicide, and she was committed to 25 years in a mental health facility. Released in 2021 under GPS monitoring, she later had restrictions eased in 2023. Courts rejected arguments that their mental states warranted juvenile trials, emphasizing the crime's premeditated brutality. Judges noted the girl's ability to plan for months, use deception, and showed chilling detachment during interrogations. Leutner underwent multiple surgeries and endured lasting physical and emotional scars. In a 2019 interview, she recalled lying in the woods, thinking, "I shouldn't be alive." Despite trauma, she pursued a medical career, stating the attack gave her life purpose. "Without the whole situation, I wouldn't be who I am." Her family opposed Geyser's release, emphasizing community safety. Critics pointed to creepypasta's role in normalizing horror fantasies for vulnerable youths. Waukesha's police chief called it a wake-up call about online dangers. Experts argued the girl's psychiatric conditions warranted treatment over punishment, highlighting systemic gaps in addressing childhood psychosis. The narrative of evil girls obsessed with a boogeyman overshadowed nuanced discussions about mental illness and peer dynamics. The case inspired documentaries like HBO's Beware the Slenderman and remains a touchstone in discussions about juvenile crime. As of 2024, Geyser's conditional release to a group home faced state opposition over concerns about graphic reading materials and communications, though psychologists deemed her no longer a threat. Up to this date, unanswered questions remain. Can children with severe mental illness fully comprehend their actions? Geyser's lack of remorse, as she stated, "It didn't feel like anything," challenges legal definitions of intent. How can caregivers identify and intervene when fantasy becomes dangerous? The girl's isolation and immersion in online communities suggest warning signs missed by adults. While Peyton Leutner rebuilt her life, and her attackers navigated treatment and legal battles, Geyser's attorney stated, "Morgan's fight is not over," a sentiment echoing the enduring struggle to balance justice, mercy, and understanding in the shadow of a modern myth.